one more minute for Rebecca to join us. While we do, I'll remind everyone that we've got about an hour this morning to do some words from our guests and then throw it open to your questions from the floor. And after that, there will be some one-on-one interviews that have been pre-booked already. So there's still one more person to sit on the end, so I think we need to allow room for Rebecca on the end. Thank you for bearing with us. This is our first open briefing in over 18 months, so as you can see, there's always a few technical hiccups. Deborah, any word on Rebecca's ETA?
Yeah, she's coming. She'll be here in a minute.
Well, I think it's probably best to get underway now, and Rebecca can jump in as soon as she gets here. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to an exclusive briefing from the Foreign Press Association. And yes, it's our first one in person like this for a very long time. The last one was over 18 months ago. I think it was either Dominic Raab or Nicola Sturgeon, and it's been a very long time. And this is our shiny new place for future meetings like this. The Royal Overseas League has several large rooms like this, and we hope to iron out the audiovisual details for future briefings. And definitely have a splitter box for TV and radio next time. Apologies for not doing that. Okay, so good morning and welcome. This week at the Royal Courts of Justice, the US government will appeal against an earlier decision. Not to send Julian Assange to America. If Julian loses, those on his team believe that the very concept of a free press will be under threat. So to talk about this morning, we are very privileged to have with us again Kristen Huffington, the editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, and Stella Morris, the first time in person at a briefing, we're very happy to say, Julian's partner and lawyer. And joining us in just a minute is Rebecca Vincent, the director of Reporters Without Borders Global. So to start us off, please, Stella, we'd love to hear from you. What can you tell us as we head into this week's trial about Julian's mental and physical state?
Well, I saw Julian yesterday in Belmont prison, and he was looking very unwell. Worried about him because he was wearing a t-shirt. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm going to march, so my voice isn't. I saw Julian yesterday. Saturday morning, in Belmarsh prison, and I was quite taken aback by how thin he was. He was wearing a t-shirt, so I hadn't seen his arms for a long time, so I could see how thin he's got. So he was looking very unwell, but you know there have been such important developments in the case over the past 3 months, I'd say, that we both hope that this will be the end of it.
And can you tell us a little more about the implications for Julian at this week's extradition hearing?
So this week's appeal is the U.S. that is appealing a decision in January in which the magistrate blocked the extradition on the basis that to do so would be oppressive. Section 91 of the Extradition Act deals with oppression, and her findings were based on the expert evidence of numerous medical experts, which found that should Julian be extradited, it would drive him to commit suicide. Not just because of the conditions that he's likely to face, but because of everything that has happened until this point. The appeal will be 2 days. The first day we expect will be dominated by the U.S. Arguments, because they're the ones that are appealing. But the second day is where we expect the new evidence to be dealt with in the form of a report that was published a few weeks ago by Yahoo News, a 7,500 word investigation, three investigative journalists who spoke to over 30 sources within the National Security Division, the National Security Council, and the CIA, very senior people, including named sources, that confirmed that during Mike Pompeo's directorship of the CIA had prepared sketches, what they called sketches and options about how to murder Julian. And that they had already also developed plans to kidnap him from the embassy and rendition him, extrajudicially kidnap him and take him out of the jurisdiction to who knows where, and do, well, what the CIA does when it renditions. And this is a game changer going into the appeal, because it shows the true nature, the true origins, the true criminality of the U.S. actions against Julian, and it completely taints any semblance of legality of this extradition appeal that we're going into.
And I know this must be difficult for you, but how has that? What effect has that had on you? These extraordinary reports from Yahoo.
It's confirmation for what I already knew, because while we were inside the embassy, it was a very oppressive environment, and towards the end, I'm saying more or less from, I'd say, March 2018 onwards, but it became more and more so. But at the same time, there were lots of reports that Ecuador was about to force Julian out of the embassy. So essentially the Ecuadorian government under the new president, Lenin Moreno, had struck a deal with the US. And we know this now because just after Julian was arrested, some whistleblowers in Spain who had been working inside the embassy in the security company went first to El País and then to the police to report the illegal activities, operations that they had been carrying out against not only Julian, but his lawyers and our baby and me and my mom, and amongst other things. And so we had that side, we had kind of the operational part of what was going on, and these whistleblowers said that they were working for the CIA via, well, the contract was with Las Vegas Sands, which was owned by Sheldon Adelson, who died a few months ago. And Sheldon Adelson was Trump's and Pompeo's major financial backer. The biggest financial backer of the Trump presidency was Sheldon Adelson. And there are lots of reports about his incredible influence on Trump's policies in the Middle East. So these whistleblowers provided not just their own testimony, but a lot of data, emails, pictures, videos from those operations that they had been carrying out. And those emails show how it wasn't just incidental CCTV spying or CCTV security inside the embassy. No, it was targeted surveillance, targeting Julian's lawyers by name, recording meetings, and then physically taking them to Las Vegas, and also traveling to Virginia, where the Eastern District of Virginia court is. And so we have this extraordinary situation where the operational end of it was known to us more or less a few months into Julian being incarcerated in Belmarsh in 2019. By September, the Spanish court, High Court, it's like the equivalent of the High Court here, the Audiencia Nacional, had opened an investigation into the CEO of this company, UC Global, and had arrested him. And they conducted raids at his office and at his home. And at his home, they found more material, but among the things they found were 2 handguns, one loaded, with their serial numbers filed off. So we were literally inside the embassy with a group of mercenaries, and one of the things that they disclosed to the Spanish investigation is that they discussed poisoning Julian inside the embassy. And they discussed leaving the door open so that deniably he could be kidnapped from the embassy, taken out of the embassy, and they didn't know what happened. And the poison plot was being looked at, and they said that they were afraid that Julian had installed a camera inside the fridge, so it was not viable to poison his food. And that was a fridge that I was constantly eating from. I was pregnant twice during that period. And it's just, it's confirmation, but it's also bringing it back, because this was it was a really terrifying environment. At one point, I stopped going into the embassy because it was so harassing, and I was 6 or 7 months pregnant at the time. I'm trying to conceal that fact because I didn't know how Ecuador would use it to expel Julian, if it would be used as an excuse to expose him to extradition, to drive him out, or also for my own safety. And I mean, it was very stressful. And my doctors told me I had to, take it easy because it was a very stressful environment. So from November 2018, I stopped going into the embassy. And I felt that it felt like we were prey. It felt like Julian was prey. And because I was the person who was closest to Julian, I felt that I was very clearly a target. And it's clear that I was a target from the emails that the Spanish investigation has produced. There's one email that says, priority is Stella Morris. And I was followed and, probably broken into. I don't know the extent of it, but I did feel so exposed. And I felt that maybe they might beat me up or try to kill me or something to get to Julian, because they were desperate to drive him out of the embassy and into Belmarsh prison. And so now we have this extraordinary situation where we have this investigation by Yahoo News and these high-level officials that were disgusted with what was going on, what was being planned, who have now gone on record to expose what was going on. But I think it would be wrong to suggest that this is just Pompeo going rogue. In that article, there are a lot of details that should be read in detail about how the plans that were being elaborated were also to kill others in European countries. We don't know who those were. I mean, was it Kristen?
Yeah. Well, on that, and thank you, I know how difficult this is to talk about, but we really appreciate you sharing this with us. Well, Kristen, on that same report, indeed, it did say the CIA had plans for, quote, extensive spying on WikiLeaks associates, sowing discord amongst the group's members and stealing their electronic devices. This seems like stuff out of a spy novel.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise us after the declaration by Pompeo in 2017 that he viewed WikiLeaks as a non-state hostile intelligence service. There are not many people that picked up on that. What does that mean? What we knew at that point, that it had to mean basically that we were being targeted as a hostile spy group or terrorists, so anything would be allowed. And I mean, what is allowed against a hostile spy? Yes, what would normally be considered illegal, as wiretapping, physical surveillance, stealing equipment, and even assassination. I mean, that was what was on the table, and we knew at that time that we need to be careful, but this has been basically the reality for 10, 11 years now. It is the repercussion that when you expose the secrets of the empire, will come back at you. But I've been asked many times, were you surprised by the Yahoo story that came out a month ago? And unfortunately, I have to say I wasn't. And that is a sorry thing to say, that you are not surprised that at the highest level of government in the United States, a plan is being concocted, which basically, in its essence, is no different from the plan that the Saudis were concocting against Khashoggi in Turkey around about the same time. The only difference is that the Khashoggi plan was carried out, but the intention is the same, and the victims are the same, journalists. So this is the seriousness of the matter, and it feels almost absurd after everything that has been unearthed in the, not just as Stella mentioned, in the case in Spain, spying on lawyers, spying on legally privileged communication, stealing of documents. Let's not forget that Papa Person's office in Spain was broken into. We all knew that before, and the indication that there had been kidnapping or plots of poisoning. That was from the side of the people that were supposed to be protecting Julian, but were bribed into becoming basically a possible assassination squad. So you can imagine what feeling Stella had in the embassy, and for us that were visiting him, to be in this. I think Stella once called it, actually, it was like a black site in the end, and that is the truth. But before we got the news from the Yahoo story, one of the key witnesses who was backing up the most damaging elements in the indictment against Julian, elements that were supposed to sort of underline the fact that or trying to undermine the fact that he's a journalist, so-called the hacking charge, although no hackings ever occurred or even is alleged to have occurred. The key witness there has last spring actually recounted his testimony and basically went on record saying that none of this happened. It is.
What do you count this change of heart?
I don't know. We're talking about a very troubled individual who has been diagnosed as a borderline psychopath by a court-appointed psychiatrist. So God knows what changed his heart in that. But what actually is striking is that the elements in the indictment were frequently mentioned in the magistrate court here by the U.S. lawyers. It is again and again referred to in actually the ruling of Judge Barretso. So the magistrate court was misled on a very key point. That alone should have actually sufficed in throwing out this case entirely. And now we have the story from the Yahoo News about kidnapping or plot to assassinate. It's just extraordinary in entirety. One would actually expect that under normal circumstances, we would not be going to the High Court on Wednesday. This shouldn't be in a court. This is so illegal from the beginning to the end that it's actually a farce that our justice system is being bothered with this.
On this matter, there's a coalition of over 2 dozen press freedoms and human rights organizations that have called on the Biden administration to drop all charges against Julian. And Rebecca, you and RSF have been very active in that. Can you tell me more about the petition?
Sure. Well, this is not the first time that we've called on any U.S. administration to drop this case, but certainly President Biden had an opportunity that he missed when taking office to distance himself from the legacy of his predecessor. He could have simply instructed his Department of Justice not to pursue this appeal. Unfortunately, what we're seeing so far is that the U.S. seems determined to continue to pursue this. These recent reports are alarming. In fact, they are outrageous, completely unacceptable by any state, and they lend an urgency to our concerns for Julian Assange's well-being. We've already had concerns about the state of his mental health, of course, his physical health, whilst he remains in Belmarsh prison, and certainly if he is extradited to the U.S., where he would face even harsher conditions there. But this as well calls into question whether we can trust our systems at all. And I don't just mean in the U.S. Some of these scenarios involved British assistance as well. So let's remember that he is still in this country, he is in high security prison where he should not be, and every day that he remains there, he is at risk. But I want to be very clear that it is not just humanitarian concerns or concerns about his treatment in this regard that is the basis for our call. We believe that Julian Assange should not be detained at all on substantive grounds. He never should have spent a single day behind bars, and it is a travesty that this continues. So this recent petition was triggered again by the new reports by Yahoo News, but we have been calling on the Biden administration since day one to close this case, and I will repeat that call today. None of this is inevitable. This does not have to move forward. Even Wednesday and Thursday does not have to happen. At any point, the Department of Justice could simply close this case, put this hell to a stop, put the suffering to a stop for his family, but send a message that this administration is going to live up to its words. The U.S. is trying to emerge again as a voice for human rights and free expression in the world. This case will continue to serve as a major thorn in the side of this administration and any that continues to pursue this case. So it needs to stop. Enough is enough. It's been more than a decade, and the damage has already been done. We will already not know which stories have not been told over the past 11 years now because of how Julian Assange has already been treated. But now is the time to stop it and to set a positive example going forward.
And to draw you out on the upcoming hearing, you followed them very closely, and now you had an extraordinarily difficult time just getting access to witnessing his extradition hearings. What do you expect? Do you expect more of the same this week? Or?
Unfortunately, currently it's more of the same. So from day one, I want to make this really clear. It's been the hardest to access case of any in my career and any that any of my colleagues at Reporters Without Borders and our international network have ever experienced. And I mean in any country, including countries with far worse press freedom records than the UK. During the entire first instance proceeding...
There's a microphone here that is giving a little bit of it's a hissing. Can I just move around?
Certainly.
Sorry, just give us a second. It could be...
It says the moving of the other.
Could be a small amount of feedback from one of these. Let's just make sure nothing's pointing at another microphone.
Okay.
Sorry,
Hopefully, if we can still hear Rebecca and Esther. Okay, Rebecca. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, it's okay. Just flash flag it if it is a problem again. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. From the very beginning, throughout the first instance proceedings. Okay, I don't know which mic this is.
Okay, let's try one more time. Forgive me.
When you continue talking, just say that the weather's like.
Sorry, we've got a lot of microphones here. It could possibly be a lapel mic.
Okay, is that okay? Is that a bit better? Shall we try? Keep talking. Okay. This is, I'm sorry about that. No, it's all right. Okay. Yeah. Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah?
It is just at greater volume levels,
Okay,
so
okay.
we'll see how.
Is it helpful for me to repeat anything that I've already said? I mean, I probably will. Okay. So the first instance proceedings, Judge Vanessa Beretzer refused to recognize professional NGO observers as having any role different to the public. So she would not accredit us or allow us to have official seats in the court, which caused a series of extensive problems for us in gaining access. So we were forced to fight for very few spaces in the public gallery, which was difficult in February at Woolwich Crown Court, but that was before COVID restrictions were at play. And so we managed to get in, but it was very early queuing in winter temperatures. I mean, from 5 a.m. for a 10 a.m. hearing each day. And then in September, of course, the evidentiary proceedings went on for more than 4 weeks. At that point, sometimes they would only allow 2 people into the public gallery. So we were also not given access to the cloud video platform that some media had access to. But again, this judge did not recognize NGO observers as having a professional role to play. So we were able to get in only with the assistance of a large group of activists who honestly helped to queue and helped to get me into that courtroom every day because they viewed it important that we were witness to this and that we could tell the world what we saw going on in these proceedings. But it was very difficult. We're not accustomed to doing our jobs in this way. The 4th of January was the hardest of all because the UK was going back into very strict lockdown measures, and we were outside the court, I think, at about 4:30 a.m. Were repeatedly threatened with arrest by police who were trying to get us to leave when we were simply queuing to get into a hearing. Again, a hearing that is overwhelmingly in the public interest in a country that is meant to be committed to the principles of open justice and the right to a fair trial. We did get in, but again, it's been with great difficulty. And because of all of these restrictions, Reporters Without Borders has been the only NGO that has monitored the entire extradition proceedings. So we requested access again this week. This court, I should note, the High Court did allocate us a seat in August at the very last minute, but I was able to enter court to sit there to do my job as a professional NGO observer in the way that we should have been allowed the entire time. But we've written to try to gain access this week, and I was told to write back the day before the hearing, which is tomorrow. As of now, I have no idea if we'll get in or not. We will be there outside the court if not, but I'm very much hoping to be able to do my job and to continue to document the outrageous behavior of everybody involved in the persecution of Julian Assange.
Great, thank you. Well, there's so much to cover at this point. Let's open it up to you, our members. When I call on you for a question, please would you mind standing up and please say your name and the organisation that you work for. Yes, please.
Thanks very much. Just on the point about course, when we found out the course at the time, that's standard operating procedure. The course is very difficult to know when you've got a seat or not. So, for my advice, I have to deal with some writers and email addresses. We all have these problems every day with the course. Can I just ask a very specific question in relation to the appeal this week? Taking into account what you say, I'm not quite clear what the legal role this plays in relation to what is happening on Thursday. Obviously, this is the United States' appeal against the bar extradition. So obviously they're challenging the assessment on that Julian Assange is too unwell to be safely cared for in the US system. Are you actually entering some cross-appeal points on day 2? So you're actually reopening the parts of the judgment which Julian lost on back in January. It's not quite clear what the legal position is.
This is a question for Kristen.
I think Stella and I can probably answer that. Of course, if you're referring to the Yahoo News story and the new revelations, how that will affect the process. Was that my answer?
Yeah. My point is the course of appeal on Wednesday and Thursday has to consider the legal points which you've got before it. So on Wednesday, in the US's case, that the judge in January misapplied the law on mental health and safety in the United States. We kind of understand that because that's their appeal. What I don't understand is how the arguments you're raising today actually have any bearing on the outcome of what's going to happen this week in terms of the legal process. I entirely appreciate the point that this is part of, there is a wider debate to be had here about what the US is doing, but I don't understand actually how it applies to what's actually happening this week. Are the judges going to be presented with points of appeal which reopen parts of the case which Julian lost on, for instance, that there was dual criminality, that the extradition request was correctly made? Are those points reopened in this case?
But these new points have a direct bearing on the appeal points that were allowed. That is obvious. On Wednesday, we assume that the Americans will try to continue their attack on the expert witness that they've been trying to undermine and elaborate on the so-called assurances. The assurances that Julian will be treated fairly after he is extradited to the United States in their prison systems. But and they will not place him under harsh measures or in solitary confinement and what have you. Let's not forget that these so-called assurances and those points came after they lost the case in January. Then they came back and said, okay, well, we can assure we will treat him fairly. So that should not be actually admissible in an appeal here, because from a legal standpoint, you cannot just try to amend after the fact, after you've lost a case. But these new revelations actually have a direct implication on that point alone. Let's not forget, for example, that there is one agency in the United States that can actually demand the Bureau of Prisons to put a prisoner on national security grounds in total isolation, in solitary confinement. And that is the CIA. That is the agency that we now know was planning to kidnap or assassinate Julian Assange. So that alone should be enough to throw out that argument.
So just to clarify, so the point is the point that because the US said to give an assurances, because you won't be having any exercise subject to sound and so on.
That's not the assurance.
That is not an assurance at all.
No, sure. My question is, are the judges going to be asked on Wednesday or Thursday to absolutely decide whatever it is the US has said as part of the appeal? Because I'm trying to understand what you're asking the judges as part of this appeal to decide. It's not in this case at the moment, it's about the judges and what they decide in the UK. So you see my point?
It's not a cross appeal. The points are already decided what's going to be heard tomorrow. The Yahoo News story came out just a few weeks ago, so after the scope of the appeal had already been decided. So it's unclear how it will play on Wednesday and especially Thursday. I would say, as Kristen was saying, I mean, the big picture here is, can the UK really extradite a person to the country that was plotting to murder him? And that's inescapable. That's an inescapable point that the courts will have to deal with ultimately. And another issue I want to emphasize is that these so-called assurances are really so-called assurances. Incorporated in that document is a caveat that they might change their mind at any point. That they don't say that Julian will never be in these so-called SAMS conditions and ADX Florence. They say that we might change our mind, we might put him there anyway, subject to any act that he does. Completely undefined, any act. What is that? The Speech Act? It's not about SAMs, Special Administrative Measures, or ADX Florence. On any given day in the United States, 80,000 people every single day are in solitary confinement conditions. Only 50 of them are under SAMs. 50. The conditions, the isolation that Julian faces doesn't come out of the whatever rubric you give solitary confinement. The point is that Julian would not survive extradition, and that was the conclusion of the judge.
Rebecca, did you want to add to that?
I wanted to actually respond to the further points on access, because I think it's a bit unfair and unhelpful to dismiss the credible concerns of an international press freedom watchdog. We have experience doing this around the world, including in the UK. I've been doing this for 16 years. I've been running this bureau for 5 years. We have never experienced such barriers to access as we have in this case. Even under COVID restrictions, I have been to Malta to monitor proceedings related to the assassination of Daphne Caruana Galizia. I've been to Istanbul to monitor the murder trial of Jamal Khashoggi. No other country treats us in this way, and I haven't experienced this at other proceedings in the UK either. So I just want to make that really clear. It's not just a matter, I don't believe it's fully unintentional. Perhaps there is some incompetence in the system that is leading to some of this, but nothing has been normal about this case. Nothing has been normal about our attempts to do our jobs. And so I just want to make that very clear. I think it's a different process for journalists and for other types of observers. We are not there as journalists, we are there as professional NGO observers. That is an important part of open justice, the right to fair trial, and certainly what we would expect in accordance with international standards and best practices is that the UK ensures that proceedings like this that are overwhelmingly in the international public interest can be scrutinized and monitored.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, yes, sorry. Would you like to?
Yeah, two very simple questions. One is, how much longer could the union persist in this situation? The second one is, how important are the implications for the Spanish investigation in the final resolution of the case?
Could you repeat the questions, please?
Yeah, first one is, how much longer could the union persist in this situation? And the second one is about the implications of the Spanish investigation, how important will it be for the final resolution of the case?
Who would like to answer that one?
I mean, Julian is in Belmarsh prison, which is a terrible environment. He's been there for over 2.5 years. Thankfully, he can see me and the kids now regularly. But everyone knows who's had any dealings with prisons that if you get sick in prison, it can be catastrophic. So Julian is just the risk of him having some health complication could be catastrophic for him. Every single day that he is in prison is a severe risk to his life. And on your second point, the Spanish case is, it's the investigation is underway, and my understanding is they have an enormous amount of data that they're still sifting through. There are two people who are charged, the CEO and I think the chief of operations, who's a Belgian national, and I don't even know the full extent of the data that they've retrieved, but it's enormous. So the UK judge said that she would defer to the Spanish court and its findings in relation to this case. So the implications could be enormous.
Thank you. Yes, you and I.
I wanted to ask to Mr. Christina Rapson. The majority of the Western mainstream media just recently discovered the Julian case, and when they do, they mostly concentrate on the personal case, which is also great, but they still I'm not speaking about the war crimes that the Western governments perpetrated in 20 years. So I would like to have your position on this, and also it's clear that we need WikiLeaks, we need thousands of WikiLeaks, and I wonder what happened to WikiLeaks in the last year. So we will keep working, and it's going to be assured that we can keep having the services of WikiLeaks that is necessary to replace the government propaganda media.
Well, I mean, yes, we have continued publishing, but at a slower rate, admittedly, after Julian was arrested and put into Belmarsh prisons. But we have continued, and we will continue, and WikiLeaks will continue operating. You are quite right, and this is not a new thing, and it is almost, as you're asking me, to place a judgment on journalists for overlooking so many aspects of what has been going on in the last 20 years. So this is nothing new to us, and I have to admit that when I traveled to Baghdad in 2010, prior to a release of the collateral murder video, which showed an obvious war crime, I met the children who were wounded when they lost their father in that episode. I was still in Baghdad when and had sent my material over satellite back home, but I was still there when the video was released. And when I was flying back to Turkey, and I got into internet contact, and I was still always expecting the outcry to happen, but it didn't happen in the mainstream media. It didn't happen, and I was waiting. Maybe it will happen on day 2. Maybe it will be a cycle. And I was very disappointed, I have to say. The general public did have direct access to that video, and the outcry was with the public. But the largest focus on that point was, what is WikiLeaks, and who is this guy Julian Assange? And so the war crime was sort of in third place. This hasn't changed much, and this is still a problem. And in part, that is why we need WikiLeaks and other organizations of that sort, because we need to have the evidence available. It has to be there, because at the end of the day, one of the most important role of journalists is bring justice, and one form of bringing justice is actually to bring forth the evidence to actually bear witness to war crimes and other crimes. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Another, yes, please.
I was wondering, could you elaborate on the possible outcomes of what happened during the 2 days? So if the US would win that case, I think you would appeal at the Supreme Court, or what would happen out of that if they don't win? What would be the next steps? I mean, it would be sort of situation.
Well, it's very difficult to anticipate what will happen next. If the US manages to win, then we'll be basically set back to the position we were on January 4th, as if we had lost. The process could be very fast, and it could be also taking years. Both prospects are terrifying. Julian technically could be extradited, by the summer, if the High Court refuses. Well, I don't want to go into the various branches, but it's possible. Or it could take many years, and that's also a terrible prospect, because Julian's only human, and a person can only take so much.
Kristen.
It's just simply, in my mind, it is unthinkable that the High Court will come to any other decision but to uphold the Magistrate Court decision, not to extradite Julian Assange. Anything else is totally unacceptable. It would be such a stain on the system in this country that I certainly hope there will be enough pressure and realization how devastating it would be for this country if somehow the judges would come to the decision of reversing the Magistrate Court decision. But at the end of the day, of course, that would only be half a victory if Julian is set free from Belmarsh, and of course, I mean, that would be a huge step forward. But in the end, at the end of the day, the Biden administration needs to come to terms with that they have lost this. This is just cannot continue. With all the information that has come forth, the Attorney General in the Biden administration must call this off and drop the charges.
Thank you. Rebecca, did you have anything to add to that? I know you've, speaking on UK involvement, you've called for an investigation into what involvement the UK may have had in the CIA's grand plans. Has anything come of that?
We haven't called for an investigation. I think we just commented on our substantive concerns in that regard. We focused more on the core of this case, the legal proceedings. Like Kristen, I very much hope that we will see the first instance ruling upheld this week. That would be the best possible outcome. We worry that even if that were the scenario, that Julian Assange will be left cruelly in detention as the US continues to pursue its appeal. That would also be really a continued injustice. And so what we would like to see is a scenario where he at least can go home as quickly as possible, and where this whole case can come to an end without it being further prolonged and further not just suffering caused to his family, but this sort of signal sent to those around the world who wish to silence critical reporting, that it is okay when powerful countries, when standard setters are able to get away with this. That sends a signal to everybody else that this is okay. It undermines any other effort to champion media freedom globally. That should be made very clear. This case is often compartmentalized and treated like an exception, and it is not. It is part of a very worrying pattern that we see around the world. Only these two states should not be part of it. We are meant to do better. And so this is one reason we work on this case. It's so important to hold our own countries, our own democracies to the same standards as everywhere else. The media has an important role to play in that. So it's really important that you all stick with this case. I'm very pleased to see such a good turnout today. And we are very happy to continue this conversation beyond these proceedings as well.
Sorry, can I just add?
Yes, please.
I was asked whether we'll see justice in this case, and the answer is we will never see justice in this case, because Julian has been so wronged that there's no possible prospect of justice. But there's a lot to be, beyond Julian's freedom, there's a lot that needs to be unraveled here, and it's starting to unravel through the Spanish case, through this story that the investigation by Yahoo News. And I only see, I see this as a snowball, really. There will just be more and more information about the criminal actions and the incredible persecution that has been mounted against Julian over time. It's inevitable. And this country also needs to come clean. It needs to be scrutinized, because in that story, in that Yahoo story, it says that the British authorities were aware of some of these plans, but we don't know to what extent, which of these plans. Were they going to go along with the kidnapping or the rendition or the killing? Did they know about the company instructed to steal my baby's nappy? What do they know? What did they know? How much were they willing to go along with it? I think this is, that's your job to find out. This case it's an attack on journalism, and again in that piece it talked about how in 2013 US authorities were trying to redefine Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald, but Ewan McCaskill was also working on those Snowden materials as information brokers in order to target them in a similar way to which the CIA then used the targeting of WikiLeaks by calling it a non-state hostile intelligence service. So this preceded WikiLeaks. This goes back to 2013 at least. And in 2013, the Fox News reporter James Rosen was called by the DOJ a co-conspirator with his source in the State Department. This is not just about Julian. This is a long-standing trend, and they were trying and they were trying in 2013, and then in 2017 they actually did it. And now that precedent has been set, and all of you have to push back, and you have to understand that this is about your jobs. Julian is not a US citizen. He was working from this country, invited here by The Guardian to work on the Iraq war logs and the Afghan war diaries and the State Department cables. And he was publishing together with European publishers. He has nothing to do with the United States, except he was exposing their crimes. And now they're using their laws to go after him extraterritorially. And just because it's called the Espionage Act, it doesn't mean, I see this reported sometimes, he's accused of espionage. He's not accused of espionage in the normal sense of the word. That's just what the act is called, Espionage Act. The wording is so broad that it targets journalism. And this has been, it goes back to the Pentagon Papers when they were considering going after the Washington Post and New York Times with the Espionage Act, because it's from 1917, it's incredibly broadly worded, and it doesn't suggest that when you publish, you're publishing, it doesn't suggest that journalists are funneling information to a foreign power to benefit them. No, the wording says just disseminating information, and they've used that disseminating to mean publishing. Julian is accused of receiving, possessing, and publishing information to the public. That's not espionage. So I ask you please to stop suggesting that Julian's accused of espionage, because it's false. He's accused of journalism.
Thank you. Moving along, Hugh. Thank you for waiting patiently.
Hugh, Australia. Two quick questions. The first one is, are you expecting that following the 2 days of hearings on Wednesday and Thursday that the judges will delay a judgment being handed down for a couple of weeks or months?
We don't really know how long it will take them to deliver it. We are told that usually it's 4 to 6 weeks. If it will go beyond that, we wouldn't be at all surprised. The entire procedure here has been a delaying tactic, and actually this is punishment through process that has been going on in the courtrooms here. But 6 weeks, mid-December, end of December.
Should I expect a result on Thursday?
No, definitely not.
And the second question is, you mentioned that Julian wants to go home. Sally spoke about the fact that Julian was here just to do work at the Guardian. If Julian was to get out, where would he go? Where is his home? And where does he want to be?
Well, his home is with me and the kids, and our home is wherever Julian is safe. And so far, Australia has done nothing to ensure Julian's safety. They haven't even asked the Trump administration, now the Biden administration, to drop this case. I mean, what does it take? The US was plotting to kill an Australian journalist, an Australian an Australian winner of the Walkley Award, which is like Australia's Pulitzer Prize. What does it take? I mean, of course Julian wants to go back to Australia, but Australia has to do something The government has to do something to save his life.
Would he feel safe in the UK?
I mean, after what we've read, how can Julian feel safe? How can we feel safe? It's the criminal, lawless behavior. There has to be a signal from somewhere that this is completely intolerable and unacceptable. I've said it before, we have a right to exist. But so far, no one is acknowledging that right.
So just finally, if you're ruling out Australia and the UK, does Julian have anywhere to go?
I'm not ruling out those countries. I'm saying that they have to step up, you know, not just Australia and the UK. You know, this affects European countries too. That Yahoo News story said that they were planning to kill people in European countries for publishing. You know, if that doesn't warrant some kind of statement about the European countries should do more, the European Union should do more. But there is a lot of support. I mean, Julian has the support from the biggest organizations, RSF, of course, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch. All the press freedom organizations are firmly behind Julian. The German federal human rights commissioner issued a statement that's very unusual. The Council of Europe Human Rights Commissioner has issued statements calling for Julian's freedom and for the case to be dropped. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has repeatedly raised this case. The OSCE, you know, this is not a marginal issue. Everyone who looks into it understands that this is our basic freedoms. The press's basic freedoms to publish freely without fearing incarceration for the rest of your lives. The political culture in this country and in the rest of Europe, to be able to scrutinize what the government doesn't want you to scrutinize.
Okay, we've got time for
just to add to that, we have a cross-party parliamentary group supporting Julian in Australia, in this country, in Germany, in Italy, Greece, Iceland. There is a growing support. President of Mexico has offered a sanctuary in Mexico. There are signals from Switzerland that he could be saved there. But we need more signals of that nature from political leadership. This is he has support, and that would be extremely important.
Okay, we've got time for just two more quick questions. Benedict and then Latika, and I think that's all we've got time for.
Hi, Benedict Pavley, France 24. As somebody who's reported on Julian Assange from day one, so for the last 11 years, so you talked about his physical appearance. But what is his state of mind right now as he approaches Wednesday and Thursday, 2.5 years in Belmont prison? And he's obviously read and knows about the reports about assassination, kidnap, rendition. What's he thinking? What you know, how is he approaching this?
Sorry. It's an ongoing struggle for him inside the embassy. Where he didn't slip. Inside the prison. It's very hard, especially when during the lockdown where he wasn't able to see us. thankfully, we've been able to have regular contact, even when we weren't able to physically go to the prison. I think, we all feel that something's got to give. I mean, at what point? What does it take? For Julian to be released, if not, that the admission that he was almost killed by the country that's trying to extradite him.
Sorry, do you feel you can talk freely to him? Because is this via Zoom? Do you feel that you can actually have...
No, all our conversations are... I mean, Belmarsh Prison is the, they call it Britain's Guantanamo, and it was built in the 1990s to house IRA convicts. Everything is severely monitored, even though it shouldn't be. Even the video conferencing that he has with his lawyers recently discovered that it's backdoored by design, just for technical reasons supposedly, but that means that it can be hacked even if they weren't officially monitoring it. So there's just, of course, it's not. When I visit him with the kids or without the kids, the hall where you visit is a big hall, and everyone is receiving visits at the same time. It's about 40 prisoners at the same time. There are cameras everywhere, and probably microphones as well. I mean, that's the assumption, and so it's. The embassy was similar,
You must feel like you're never going to be free of surveillance.
It stays with you. It's this threat, this constant menace stays with you. And, it's...
Right, thank you. Latika, did you have questions?
Thank you. Latika Burke from the City Morning Herald. Stella, is it the case, given all that you've been saying about the lack of signals for safety in human history for you and your family, that you would feel safer living in a country like Russia compared to Britain and Australia?
No. Julian wants to be able to go to Australia to see his family. His mom, who he hasn't seen for years, because she can't travel. And the UK, Europe actually has formal safeguards precisely for situations where journalists are the object of assassination plots and so on. The formal mechanisms exist. And it's a test. Is it really down to politics, or do these principles actually mean something? Do these values actually mean something? And I see more and more, as I said, all these major organizations and the OSCE and the Council of Europe and so on. This is not. These are significant institutions, and there's a lot of support politically. But we're not there yet, and I want to see an affirmative show of principle by the organizations, by the countries involved, that this is intolerable, that killing, we were all outraged and denounced what happened to Jamal Khashoggi. That can't depend on which country kills, right? It attaches itself to the victim. And so, this is a real test.
Okay, I think that is about all we've got time for. Did any of you want to make some closing remarks as we go into this final week? Rebecca, did you?
Just to repeat our position that Reporters Without Borders fully believes that Julian Assange has been targeted for his contributions to journalism, and that the implications for journalism and press freedom will be severe and long-lasting, and not just in the US or UK, but internationally. So regardless of the specifics of the case, that principle is also there. And now is the time for solidarity. Now is the time for pressure on the states involved. Now is the time to speak out before it is too late. Because as we said many times before, this certainly will not stop with Julian Assange.
Thank you. Stella?
Yeah, it's not really, it's picking up on what Latika was saying, and I think it's just worth emphasizing here. By April 2017, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, which is the one tasked to find out whether people, organizations are agents for foreign powers, had concluded conclusively that WikiLeaks was not a Russian agent, that it had nothing to do with Russia. And that's why they had to invent a new term, non-state hostile intelligence service, emphasis on non-state. Enough is enough. The CIA then, of course, waged a propaganda war, because the CIA has a massive propaganda unit, which we all know, and then we had former CIA officials on CNN and on MSNBC and so on, pushing a narrative which they knew was false, because that was the CIA's way of attacking WikiLeaks, of undermining WikiLeaks, of pushing the Russiagate narrative, even though they knew it was false, even though it created enormous societal and political havoc in the US, just because it was waging a war against WikiLeaks, and they knew this Russiagate narrative was a way of undermining WikiLeaks and Julian. In order to assassinate a person, you have to assassinate their character first. It was part of setting the ground for his extradition, setting the ground for reducing political support, of putting a question mark over WikiLeaks' work or motivations, which they knew was false. So enough. The CIA is the agency that is tasked with finding out this intelligence. And they concluded, and it's in the Yahoo News story, they concluded that there was no link, that WikiLeaks is independent. And because WikiLeaks publishes things that the US government doesn't like, it was fair game. That's what happened.
I just want to say that there are so many untold stories in this story, and for you who are stationed here in England, there is ample material to follow up on, because I haven't seen yet. And that is what was the role of the UK government in these plots, which I urge you to try to follow up on. What we haven't mentioned here, that it is already a call up in the US Senate for an investigation into the elements of this latest Yahoo story. But what did as I said earlier, what did the UK government know? It is implied that they were fully aware of all these kidnapping plots and plans. They were not really happy about it, but they did acknowledge that they would take part in a shootout when the Americans, based on wrong information, thought that Julian would spring and try to go to Russia or something. They actually, according to that story, contacted the authorities here and asked for firepower. Actually, they would provide the guns to take part in ramming into cars and a shootout behind Harrods in Knightsbridge. This is So of course they were updated and they were in the know about the entire thing. But we need more information on that, and that is certainly a story, and if ever there was. So that's still untold one that I would like to know more about.
If anyone wants to chase that up, there are those of you who have booked one-to-one interviews afterwards, please come forward. I think that's about all we've got time for. I really want to thank our guests, Kristen Hapson, Stella Morris and Rebecca Vincent for your time today. I'm Kate Kira, President of the FDA, and thank you on behalf of all the FDA members, and we hope to see you at our next briefing. That's all. Thank you very much, and thanks to our guests.